How does a fish go from being perhaps the most abundant in Michigan waters to gone? This is the story of Michigan's Arctic Grayling, and more importantly, it's the story of how to bring them back.
There were prospectors that were coming up and looking for logging areas in the state of Michigan. And they found this whitefish, it was dubbed. They didn't really realize it was a grayling at that point, and it was a huge draw.
When people went stream fishing for trout species in the northern lower peninsula, it was grayling. That's what they were after, and that's what they would catch.
They were extirpated, which means they're no longer here, but as a species, they're not gone from the earth.
To actually have lost a species in the state is just, in my mind, just a huge black eye. That's something that's much harder to bring it back than it would have been if we had been working earlier, everyone, before we realized that it was lost.
Michigan has historically had a very strong conservation ethic. Unfortunately, that conservation ethic has kind of been diluted, and I feel like, especially with the involvement of the tribes, it's pulling us back to that traditional knowledge that the tribes can provide because they were here before us.
Native species is a notion, an idea, and a philosophy that's just grounded in tribal resource management and conservation.
The grayling's disappearance can be traced to a number of different factors, all of which were caused by humans.
There used to be no fishing regulations in the state of Michigan, so there was a lot of overfishing in the 1800s.
We were literally taking these fish and piling them up on banks 6 feet tall. We look at overfishing now as like taking a couple dozen too many, but I mean, they were literally taking them out. You could have 6 hooks on a line and catch 6 fish at the same time.
There wasn't a saw timber carrying tree left standing between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron.
They used to slide the timber. They harvested those logs down into the streams to move them down to process them at the lumber mills, and that put a lot of sediment into our streams.
Once the grayling started to decline because of this kind of habitat destruction from the logging and pushing logs down the river, and then this overfishing side, we introduced non-native fish.
Brown trout are actually from Scotland and Germany, and they came here in the late 1800s. So if you think about coevolution, brook trout and grayling, they've evolved together here. So it does make sense that they would be able to coexist well together in the streams, where brown trout weren't introduced until the late 1800s.
Brown trout is like the staple of a sport fishery in this state that brings in a lot of money and resources.
We've kind of got to figure out where these fish will play and where streams can be managed for grayling without precluding brown trout from areas as well.
There's a strong indication this effort, with its emphasis on teamwork, will be different.
The Michigan Arctic Grayling Initiative is truly a collaborative effort among a very diverse group.
This is statewide, broad level of support and interest, and because of that, we're now able to capitalize on that, and that builds momentum.
It's a different process than what happened before when grayling were just willy-nilly scattered, stacked all over the place without regard to water quality.
What we're really focusing on is trying to figure out what suitable fish communities grayling can survive in, but not only survive, but also thrive. And I also look at imprinting at early life history stages, so really young, just after hatching.
Imprinting is that time where the fish learn for lack of a better term, the smell of the water that they were hatched in.
You got to bring them up from an egg in where they're going to be. So they have this deep evolutionary capacity that they require, to be born and raised in the place that they're going to live and survive.
A remote site incubator is a device that allows grayling to develop in the water it will live in by exposing the eggs to stream water in an environment safe for them to grow. It appears the RSIs are the missing piece for a successful reintroduction.
They're a touchstone to our conservation past, our ecological past. And if we have to make room for grayling and not have so many brown trout and rainbow trout, I feel like that's a great trade-off and a necessary trade-off.